Welcome back, reactors, to The Reaction Shot, a pop culture podcast. I am proudly part of the You Run Podcast Network, a powerhouse lineup of incredible creators covering everything under the sun. And speaking of incredible creators, I want to spotlight one show in particular, Release Date Rewind. What if you could go back to the day that your favorite movie came out and experience it all over again? That's exactly what you get with Release Date Rewind, the podcast that takes you back to the movies, the music, the pop culture, and moments that defined an era. Whether it's a childhood favorite, a forgotten classic, or something you haven't thought about in years, Release Date Rewind is all about the nostalgia, the memories, and asking one very important question: does it still hold up? So if you love pop culture, nostalgia, and taking a trip back in time, check out Release Date Rewind. Seriously, do it. Press rewind, hit play, and relive that special release all over again. You can find Release Date Rewind along with all the other You Run Podcast creatives at yourunpodcast.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And after you've filled your podcast queue with all of You Run Podcast creators, I have two more recommendations, only if you're looking for something to watch. First up is the road trip revenge epic, Is God Is. In this critically acclaimed, genre-bending thriller, twin sisters with disfiguring burn scars have their world upended when their mother, they believed was dead, reveals that their father is responsible. When she orders them to kill him for what he did, they must decide whether to seek vengeance or find mercy. Is God Is, starring Kara Young, Mallory Johnson, Vivica A. Fox, Sterling K. Brown, and Janelle Monáe, is out now on Blu-ray and DVD. And then once the credits roll on that, it's time to head to space. That's right. The dazzling, heartwarming space odyssey, Project Hail Mary, starring Ryan Gosling, as a science teacher who wakes up on a spaceship with no memory of who he is or why he's there. As his memories return, he must uncover the mystery behind a force that's threatening the sun, and an unexpected friendship may be humanity's best hope. Own Project Hail Mary now on 4K UHD, Blu-ray, and DVD. Two incredible films worth a watch. And what pairs better with two amazing films? Incredible tacos, right? So let me ask you this, reactors. Do you like free stuff? Well, I've got something for you. As a Reaction Shot listener, you can score a free half-size queso from Condado Tacos with a minimum $10 purchase. Just download the Condado Tacos app from your app store and head to the Rewards tab. Tap Rewards code, and enter the unique code Reaction Shot to unlock your free queso. That's it. It's cheesy, but you listen and we hook you up. At over 50 locations in 10 states, Condado is the place to go. So, if you got a Condado near you, grab your buds, grab some tacos, and don't forget the queso. Again, download the Condado Tacos app, head to the Rewards tab, tap Rewards code, and enter Reaction Shot to score your free half-size queso. And that reward is valid for 21 days after you enter it into the app. Talk about a good deal. So thanks for listening to The Reaction Shot, and we'll see you at Condado Tacos soon. Crave together. Whew, yum. Okay, now, back to The Reaction Shot. You're joining me for episode 12 of season 3. There are some filmmakers whose work you recognize before you even know their name. You've probably seen their images, their campaigns, their storytelling, maybe even felt something because of them, without even realizing who was behind the camera. And today, I'm talking to one of those filmmakers. Elena Parasco is a New York-based film director and creative director whose work has built a reputation for being visually striking and deeply human. She's worked with some pretty incredible names and brands along the way. Nike, Coca-Cola, the WNBA, the New York Knicks, Juilliard, Red Bull, and many more. And this isn't just a list of impressive credits. Her work has been recognized on some of the biggest stages in the industry, alongside some pretty noteworthy awards. Her work has also been featured everywhere from the New York Times, Forbes to Vogue, Adweek, and ID Magazine, among others. She's spoken on panels including the NBA All-Star panel in Chicago and Nike's The Force is Female, discussing the importance of inclusive voices and powerful storytelling. And her creative work does not stop with film. Her photography was featured in both a book and a 2020 museum exhibition in Harlem called City Game, curated by We Should Do It All and Spike Lee. But today, we're going beyond the campaigns, the awards, and the resume. Because Elena has stepped into a different kind of storytelling with her short narrative film, I'm Not Home. Starring Julian De Niro and Eli Brown, I'm Not Home takes place 5 months after two friends, Rune and Tylo, last saw each other. Rune unexpectedly shows up at Tylo's with a box of old answering machine tapes that he thinks they need to listen to together. The tapes are filled with strangers leaving messages in moments of hope, vulnerability, and uncertainty. As Rune and Tylo listen, those voices slowly start bringing their own feelings to the surface, forcing them to confront the things that they've spent the last 5 months avoiding, and the emotions they never quite said out loud. The film takes us into a deeply personal and emotional space, exploring what it means to feel disconnected from where you're supposed to belong, and the complicated, very human search for connection, identity, and a place that actually feels like home. And I think that's what makes this conversation so interesting. Because when you look at Elena's career, there's this constant thread running through everything she creates. She's interested in the human experience. So today, I'm talking with Elena Parasco and the journey that brought her to write and direct I'm Not Home. We're talking about its characters, its themes, the psychology behind the story, and the moments that make this film hit as hard as it does. This is my conversation with Elena Parasco. Hey, Elena. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Dave. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. You're actually in London right now. So what are you doing in London?
I'm actually presenting a poster at a conference for neuroaesthetics, and my specific poster is on neurocinematics. So lots of science.
Lots of science.
Yeah.
That's actually a question I wanted to ask you. Neurocinematics, that is. What exactly is that?
I mean, it's a study of film on the brain. So what's going on neurobiologically when we watch image, when we're, experiencing and perceiving sound, what parts of the brain are being stimulated and activated. But my poster specifically also talks about how simulation in the body is present. So it's a little bit about my sports work and as a sports director, but how when we watch an image through, mirror neurons and IST levels, which is interoceptor correlation, if we have a strong stylistic grip rather than more like a documentary style, which is a looser grip, and if we play with these IST levels, what creates more simulation in the viewer? So it's an interesting discussion.
That really is. I was reading a little bit about it and I was like, this is pretty incredible stuff right here. So before we get into your new short film, I'm Not Home, I want to start off with you. Who exactly are you? Not exactly the filmmaker, but just who are you in general?
Yeah. I mean, that's a question we ask ourselves every day.
It sure is.
I mean, I come from New York. Both my parents were born in Queens and I grew up in Long Island. And yeah, I think that I don't know. I think that we have such an interesting relationship with multi-hyphenates in our generation specifically. They're everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I think that obviously, I'm a storyteller, I'm a director, I'm a writer, and I'm very interested in science. I do a lot of consulting work for, numerous brands as well. But I think that ultimately I'm definitely drawn to true stories and stories that are a little bit intricate or hard to tell. And I've always been interested in what happens in the perceptive mind, what happens between story and interpretation, what happens when we can change the perception of an audience. And I think that that's why I got into sport or, um, demographics that were not usually told so readily in stories, because I wanted to kind of intercede that conversation, and intercept or other. So yeah, but I mean, I don't know what else there is to say. I'm a little bashful. So.
No, no, don't be bashful at all. That's some great stuff right there. You have a lot to be proud of. You have an incredible career. You've done a lot of work with people like Coca-Cola, Nike, the WNBA. What type of stuff did you do for all these companies?
Yeah, I mean, I did a spec film years ago when I was creative directing, and I kind of just kept seeing, passing over these scripts and these ideas to directors when I was quite young. And I finally was like, I'm just going to make this one. Like I had a really good idea and it was on sports, and I was like, let's create some more interesting content that is revolved around female athletes, where, they're not kind of the backup dancers. Like they're more dynamic. I think that we
Sure.
should weave in memory and their story a bit more. And so I did a spec piece, and then Nike ended up kind of like acquiring it and buying it in a way. And then from there, it just like, the Vimeo virality, it went wild. And I actually met like a lot of my friends who are directors through Vimeo from that, and like my
That's awesome.
mentors through that. And then yeah, after that, I just kind of tried to spend a lot of my life's work promoting women athletes and like women's sports and like the visibility of women's sports. And so I'm not saying anything that's happening today is because of me, but I am saying that it's so beautiful to see what's happened in the female sports arena and space, and the visibility, especially in the WNBA. And me and a bunch of different people that have been like promoting, these stories. We're not really getting like, I think the female director that is pushing for this is definitely this kind of like act of love towards just wanting the outcome of more stories put out there and seen.
Sure.
And so, yeah, anyway,
Yeah. And you're out there doing the damn thing.
we're doing the damn thing.
You're doing the damn thing. Now, have you always been into sports, or is that something you just kind of stumbled upon?
Yeah, I've always been into sports, definitely an athletic person. And I think that I was playing basketball in a bunch of leagues in New York. And yeah, just like the Knicks is such a big part of our culture as New Yorkers. And I think that basketball and what happened even this year with the Knicks winning,
Yeah.
it's like the collective effervescence and this feeling that kind of struck through like lightning through the city of this togetherness and this joy. And then the World Cup, I think there's like a gravitational pull to a lot of those emotional elements that sports brings, whether it's
Yeah.
like, seeing your heroes in someone that is from a different country that you would never think of, or, an underdog story, or your favorite team in a city winning for the first time in 30 plus years.
Yeah.
It's a feeling.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty amazing. You mentioned community kind of bringing people together, and you see that a lot going to even to sports bars. Like even if you're not at the game itself, but that sense of community and people getting excited about the same exact thing. And throughout your career, you've been capturing that continuously. So I think that's a great representation of that community of sport that you've been talking about. So we are here to talk about your new narrative short film, I'm Not Home. How did it feel transitioning from, all these sports ads, which you're obviously creating a lot of character with these ads? But this is like your story to tell. This was something that you wanted to put out there in the world. Obviously, it's a narrative. So, where did the spark for this film come from?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I had a very dear friend of mine pass, and
Hmm,
it really changed my life trajectory.
sure,
And I think that I was working on these characters in this story for a while, for like 3 years, and it was originally gonna be set in New York, and then it was gonna be set in Marseille because they deal with a similar problem. She passed due to a murder from someone that is homeless, but I didn't wanna create kind of an us versus them. I wanted to create actually more of a conversation of those who we leave on the fringes of society and mental illness. And I did feel like I was spending a lot of summers in Marseille, and they were dealing with a similar problem. And then so it became this kind of story and this short that was told over the course of a summer between two friends. And I always was fictionalizing it, instead of two girls, to be two boys.
sure,
And very similar to our story, best friends of 10 years. And then there's like love woven in and complexity. And then all of a sudden, they're gone. And what do you do with that? And then
Mm.
due to a lot of the constrictions, if that's, I don't even know if that's a word right now. I'm so
It
tired.
sounds great. It sounds great.
Great. Sounds great. We'll
Great
take it.
word. Yeah.
I think that a lot of the concerns of, filmmaking and budgets and raising money and, it was like a 25-minute short. It was like, we can't do this right now. There's no way. And so I kept kind of making it either shorter, condensing the story, really succinifying it. And then all of a sudden it was like one afternoon in New York. And we were lucky enough to still shoot it on film. Shout out to Kodak for all of their help. But,
Yeah.
the story really came from like this moment. I was sitting in my bedroom really missing her. And I was working on the script and rewriting the script, and I was about to give up. And I met up with my really dear friend JR, who's an executive producer of this film, and he was also really close with her. So it's like our joint friend. And it was like the three of us were so close for, I don't even know, 12 years now.
Mm.
And I was sitting in my bedroom and I was listening to her last voice note over and over. And I actually mentioned this um on during my speech at Tribeca, and I haven't really spoken about it too much, but there's this term called plosives, and it's that little burst of air that happens when someone says like a P or a B or a T in a
Mm.
recording. And normally sound engineers try to remove this. And after my friend died, I just found myself like listening to this voice message over and over, and my ear would be pressed so tightly to the phone that the plosives would come out as air. And I would pretend like they were her breath.
Mm.
And I would like close my eyes and like pretend like she was like it was that and so I think through the act of plosives, it brings you this sense of proximity and these traces of presence. And from that place is where this idea of these voicemails began, and how we can create and weave together this sense of proximity and closeness and absence and immediacy um, to stories that ended, being an externalized subplot, from what the boys' subconscious is or are. And so that's where the idea was kind of born, was like, okay, because of these limitations, let's not do it over the course of a summer. Let's do it over the course of an afternoon. And let's do it like the last time they saw each other. So it ended up being fictionalized of like an afternoon that I didn't get with her,
Mm.
but that I wish that I got. Um, but what I do love and how it all kind of came together as a story based on this true story is that it got to really explore, I think, the nature of being unresolved. And so even though it's like this afternoon that I didn't get with her, that I wish I had, to
Yeah.
talk about something that we need to talk about, um, or see her for the last time, it still floats in this act of an unresolved plot. Like you don't know what, like, do they come back together? Does Rune show up at this park that it's bookended by? Or, was the bookend of the film, the opening and closing, was he never there and it was all a dream? Like,
Mm.
was he never outside of his window screaming his name? Like, did he imagine this wanting to be the last time that he ever saw him? And I think that when you have a plot that's unresolved, you have definitely audiences that like don't love it or might not get it. We're lucky enough that a lot of audiences do want to be challenged right now. So I'm really grateful. But I also think that when you have that kind of a plot that drives it, that isn't so direct, or a narrative that's tied in a bow, or it doesn't fit in a genre perfectly, your audience can co-author with
Mm.
you and alongside you. And I think that
Yeah.
like there's that quote by, was it Horovsky? It's like, we don't go to the cinema to escape ourselves, we go to see ourselves. And I think
Mm.
co-authoring like a plot and a feeling and the drive and the ending, like projecting your own narrative or your own grief or your own loss alongside the plot as it moves and breathes,
Yeah.
it ends up being more alive. So I think it was like a culmination of those things that it ended up landing here, which is really just like a beauty and like a testament to filmmaking.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing the story about your friend. I really do apologize. It sounds like a very tragic accident, but at the end of the day, I think, making this film, it sounds like you really took the time to honor her, honor the memories that you shared, and maybe that longing of that last day that you were talking about that you wish you could have gotten with her. So again, thank you for sharing that. But yeah, that's definitely the power of filmmaking. I'm a huge fan of film. I do not make movies or anything like that, but I have really been into movies since I was a kid, and I think what you're speaking of, that co-authored narrative, is 1000% what I'd taken away from this film. I watched the movie again last night with my partner, and we were talking about kind of that co-author thing where it's like you as an audience member get to fill in those gaps, and in a way you're kind of weaving your own story into these things. You're hearing a voicemail that touches you in whatever type of way it might be, and sometimes those voice messages are narrating the things that we were never able to say,
Yeah.
and those messages are so powerful in this film. And I've watched it several times, and each time I get a little something different from it each time. And I think that is the great thing about storytelling. And it sounds like that was definitely your intention. And I'm glad that audiences are responding to it that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great stuff there. But yeah, again, thank you for sharing that story. So what was the casting like? You have Eli Brown and Julian De Niro in this film. What was that like?
Oh my God, our boys. I love our group chat. Our group chat is on fire.
Oh, I bet.
Fun to be in our group chat. Like we'll just send messages
Jealous.
like I miss the boys. They're like later
Yeah.
we'll call away. Like, where are you? Um, I mean, the two greatest joys of my life. I hope every director, especially for your first time narrative, especially on film, which is just stressful.
Oh, I bet.
Like, yeah, my producer be like, "You have one role left." I'm like, "For the film or for this
Shit.
scene?" Like,
Which one? Which one?
which one? Tell me, hurry up. Also, I would not suggest shooting your first short on film because improv is so important and it was really tough. But no, the casting. So, yeah, I mean, I always knew a little bit about the characters and how I wanted them to feel. And I think that like was interesting in building the characters, which comes right before casting, is like, I wanted them to be imperfect and I didn't
Mm,
want them to be necessarily atypical, and
sure.
B, um, this isn't exactly like a gay story, right? It's not so direct in that way, but there's so much gray area in everything. And there's gray area in the tapes, there's gray area in our boys, there's gray area in their
Mhm.
relationship. And I think that there's a stage of late coming of age that is more interesting to me than like 18-year-olds. It's like that 24 to 28, you're autonomous, you're free in your own body, and you're willing to explore, and you're curious but confused, and you have all this emotion. And I really wanted Tyler's character, who Eli Brown played, to kind of end up being actually the more brave one because he has these kind of like outbursts. Like you can feel the boiling of his energy and his
Mm,
emotion. And I wanted Rune to be quite awkward. I wanted him
yeah.
to be avoidant, but not in an avoidant, typical male way, but avoidant because he's scared to touch the feelings because if he does, he's scared to lose him, and he'd rather have his friendship and have him as like his blood forever than to touch and open up Pandora's box. So there's a lot of complexity in how I kind of wanted to build these characters, both in their imperfection and their accessibility. And I think that, when we were casting originally, I kind of wanted casting that we're going to do maybe have French actors or XYZ, but I always knew a little bit about, I think, the role and the archetype and the feeling that I wanted.
Mm,
And JR and I were on the phone together and he was like, just hit up Luca. And Luca's one of our executive producers. And I hit him up and I was like, we got to cast this thing ourselves. Like we got to know a feeling. It can't be
yeah.
like open call. Like I was doing castings and I was like, something just isn't right. And then I met with Eli, and it was funny because at the after party for the Tribeca screening, Eli told me that he got on the Zoom with me to tell me no in a
Oh,
polite way.
sure.
And that by the end of the Zoom, he was fired up. And he was like, saying, no, I'm doing it.
It's like, yeah, I'm
And
your boy. I'm your boy.
yeah, he knows. And he was like, my agents are so happy that I did it. Like, he's like, they're over the moon. And then specifically with Julian, it's like, obviously I've seen both of, the oeuvre of work that both of these talented actors have been in, whether it's Eli in Gossip Girl or a small role with Timothy in Complete Unknown, or,
Mm,
Julian's role as young Barack Obama. And I've seen them in these roles, but it was more so when you get on the Zoom with them and doing like a light read and feeling them out.
yeah.
And both of them, once we hit them, I knew. Like once, like I knew. And I was like,
Yeah.
these are our boys. And what I really love too is that in the short week that we spent filming this in New York, like they fell in love a little, and it was
Sure.
so beautiful. And I think that I
Yeah.
did this post on Instagram of some of the BTS. And people were like, why am I sobbing at these BTS photos? Like, I'm crying at this. I was like, I know
Yeah,
too.
it's great.
And so they really had great chemistry of boyhood that felt so natural. But, leading up to the film, I did what we call like summer camp. I had them in a room. And what is a technique I really love doing is like I'm like you have to have a common enemy for people to create like an inside joke or to bond. And so I kept
Sure.
being like, okay, you guys like come up with a story that's an elaborate story. I'm going to come back in the room and it's going to be yes and so we tell the story yes and whatever. So I'd create these kind of like them versus me moments in the prep for the film to create and kind of like pack in chemistry fast. And
Sure.
so we got to come up with stories together and we almost and then we kind of like created and like implanted memories on purpose to create this like well of and this depth of knowing each other, and closeness, which is
Yeah,
nice.
absolutely. That's great. Yeah, you can definitely see their chemistry on screen. It almost feels very, very intimate in a way, almost like you're in the room with them experiencing this awkwardness, but also tapping into what's actually happening, those unresolved feelings. And it's almost like you're like standing in the room with them and kind of figuring it all out yourself and hoping that maybe it's like you can nudge them to be like, just, give into this, whatever it might be. But yeah, so their chemistry is great. So I think they're perfect for the role. How long was filming?
I mean, I think it was like 3.5 days total of filming, but like a week of production.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. We're talking a lot about memories and things like that. So do you think our memories are actually memories, or do you think we kind of rewrite them over time to kind of give a different narrative to maybe things that happened or things that, like those unresolved things, we're kind of adding those little pieces in there? Do you think that's something that we do as humans?
I mean, yeah, for sure, especially with how much I've studied in neurocinematics and
Sure.
neuroscience. But I think like, memory is fundamentally revisionist,
Mm,
and I think film asks the audience to assemble meaning the same way that memory does through fragments, through a voice note, through a
yeah.
glance, through association, through a feeling. We don't remember our best friend as they were, but we remember their voice or their laugh or their breath.
Mm,
And I think I wanted the film to have that same essence. And I think that, I was less interested in having this narrative certainty involving memory and closeness than I was like emotional resonance. And I think that I just really love films that can weave in a sense of memory because it trusts the audience to finish a sentence,
mm. Yeah,
Um, it's inherently untouchable. I think like Charlotte Wells did it very beautifully in After Sun, for instance.
great
And
film.
yeah, and I think that she does such a great job in especially, being after the feeling of trying to understand someone who's already gone. And I think like similar to Derek Cianfrance in Blue Valentine as well. I think that that's somewhat of a sister brother film to the kind of, a story like this where, his own filmmaking was less about explaining how love falls apart and more conducting an investigation into it alongside the audience. And I
Yeah,
think that the memory component plays in these fragments through the tapes, which, are not just as an emotional device, but I think that the tapes really allow ourselves to feel like there's immediate context to these
mm,
voices and to these people's stories. And also
yeah,
you feel that these voicemails come from a different time. Like you can feel that
yeah,
it's not from yesterday. And
yeah.
so they also feel like these fragments of memory. And so I kind of feel like, and that's why it was a conscious choice to not have phones in the film and just to be a little bit displaced. And I think that's where memory and imagination and texture can kind of like bloom.
Mm. Perfectly said. Yeah, I think memory is definitely a tricky thing, and I think you captured all of that well with these voice messages that they're listening to, and they do kind of take you back in time. Growing up in the '90s and running home and listening to the messages that you do have, hitting play, and you have one new message and you're super excited to hear what it is. And sometimes it's people just checking in, and you kind of bring all that to life in this movie. There are so many different types of messages that are here. Some are a little silly, some are very touching, some are completely unresolved and get cut off. One of my favorite messages that are in the film is from Leah. She says, I met you at a New Year's Eve at Lucy's, the girl with the red tights. Here's my number. It gets cut off. And then my favorite moment, one of my favorite moments, I should say, is Rune says, she sounds like she doesn't know when to quit. And Tylo says, she sounds like someone who fights, knows what she wants, brave. And then Rune says, maybe he just wasn't ready. I feel like this message alone kind of rounds out these two characters and what is left unsaid. And I think the dialogue between Rune and Tylo is completely relevant to how they actually feel as the characters and what's happening in these messages. That was obviously intentional. What made you come up with that message and some of these other ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, first of all, I'm glad you caught it because a lot of
Yeah.
people like don't catch
Oh, I love it.
subtlety um that I was trying to weave in here. And so that's beautiful. Yeah, and what I loved also was like writing a lot of responses like as a whisper, like when Rune was like, he kind of says it under his breath. Like Tyler
Yeah.
didn't hear him say that,
Yeah.
maybe he just wasn't ready. Like he's
Yeah.
giving notes in the way that he can express it. But Tylo's so angry and so wanting that he is like overriding it with all of this emotion and anger that he has and why they haven't spoken and why his friend ghosted him. Um, yeah, that was a good one. Sorry, what was your question again? I
No,
forget.
you're good. You're good.
Oh.
My question, I guess, was, obviously that voicemail was intentional. You wrote that specifically to parallel their story. Or some of these messages just kind of random, or were they all
Okay, okay.
shot? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that like my intention for these was for it to feel like found tapes, right? So
Mm.
I do remember, you see the film come out, you see these reviews. We're so lucky to have so many people get the film, which is great. I was not expecting that. I was truly expecting this to not get into one festival, no one to get the tapes, no one to get it. So it was great.
Surprise.
Surprise. And I remember this one review was like, I wish the tapes were more explicit. And I'm like, but then it would not feel found. Like
Right.
I wanted them to be an essence of like for instance, my favorite one is the mechanic going, hey Rashida, you going like this, you're gonna break, you're gonna burn out too. And it's like
Yeah.
this blue collar Queens
Mm.
mechanic looking over Rashida with love and
Yeah.
worrying about her.
Yeah.
I think that, and then the tape in the bathroom where he's like, Marcus, I know we haven't spoken since you told me that essentially you came out to me at Christmas, but like I still love you, and then gives him this line about love, like reach for the fireplace, not the fireworks. I mean, that's my
Love it.
father, and I knew I wanted my father to deliver that line. And I think that to answer your question, I think the emotional range of these tapes were a lot about desire, estrangement, acceptance, humor, regret, disappointment, but also hope
Yeah.
and reminders that you're still loved in all the complicated forms that life takes. And one of the tapes was from my childhood where, she was like, hey, Rick, I don't know what's going on in that house, but he's welcome to stay here. And that was from like the only gay kid in my town getting kicked out and like nowhere to go. And I remember being so young and being so confused with like why this kid wouldn't be like, and so it's like a lot as a storyteller, as a writer, we write what we know and we write what's impacted us. And I think that I really wanted to weave in love, acceptance, and also like missed connect, Lucy from New Year's Eve, like she kept
Yeah.
calling, she
Persistence. Yeah.
not persistent, but also like putting yourself out there. And one of the tapes, because I was talking about casting as well when I was doing the Tribeca talk, was I called my doctor's office and this woman's voice and she was the one that was like, stop leaving love notes on my mother's machine.
Mhm.
I heard her voice. I go, I'm sorry, ma'am. um, can I
How
Venmo
are
you
you?
to record your beautiful voice?
Yeah.
And like, I was just on the search for, a certain feeling. And I think the themes there are very tied to the themes I just mentioned. But it acts as this like externalization of their subconscious. You know what I mean? And so they don't need to say it. You can feel it in the avoidance of such things. But yeah, and I think that I really always wanted them to be somewhat reactive to the tapes, like being bored with one or reacting as such to the Lucy tape that you mentioned. And then I always wanted like the, fireplace and the fireworks acceptance love Marcus one to
Yeah.
be when they finally get close in the bathroom and start to feel each other's like, presence again. But yeah,
Yeah, the fireplace and the fireworks one is a fantastic line as well. And you said that was your father?
that was my dad. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
I didn't even need to direct him. He two takes. This
Hmm,
man, two takes. I was like,
nailed it.
he nailed one, and then I was like, Dad, give me the that you do. Don't be on the line, huh? And he was like, hold my beer late. I got
Yep, I got you. I got you. Yeah, these voice messages are incredible as well. Very a very unique way, in my opinion, to move the story forward. And you mentioned the narrative of the story is it feels a little jumbled up. You said not a book end, beginning and end. It's kind of again, as we as an audience are creating what exactly in what order these things are happening. And one of the things I really got from this film too was it was so visually stunning, like the water on the back of his neck and the top of his back when he got his hair wet to go and get that haircut in the restroom. And you can almost feel the sticky New York hot pavement summer night, especially in the beginning scene and at the end. And it's almost like all the senses were in play here. And was that something that you were trying to capture, or was that something that just kind of like happened?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that sound and a city is always a third character, and
Yeah.
I think I had something very specific in mind, and the boys at Sound Lounge, specifically Major, who is a genius. Sound Lounge did such great pieces like The Substance and The Bear, and I was so lucky that they wanted to take this one on, and they're geniuses. And like we were throwing sound around, we were conductors together. Like we would be working for hours, and I was like, "It's not perfect yet." They're like, "Elena, I swear to God, I'm going to kill you." And I think that there's something about how not only like layered city sounds of the city or like when a dog barks or when, like a car going by, but with a certain beat. And then when it leaves, how you feel like
Mm,
someone going around a corner and then leaving you. And then boom, you're kind of back with yourself. I think there's a lot of subtlety that happens when sound moves past you, not just sound sitting and embedded in the sound design itself. So, the stickiness and the texture and like going in and out of waves of like you can kind of feel it throughout the film or all of a sudden you can hear it through the window coming in and all of a sudden it goes away. And we also recorded things where layers of like the sound of the tapes playing in the room and then it going into kind of back into the ears and playing with it being heard in that way or being heard by yourself. And so there was definitely a lot of nuance that we wanted to place here, especially because it's such an internal, external dance that's being played. Um, and I think also just in general, we're dealing with a lot of voices, and I think that voice carries a lot of presence and a lot of
sure.
weight. And I think that when someone is passed, which is, the undercurrent to all of this is, there's this emotional spine of where the tapes can grow from this place of closeness and that you kind of get this packaged play of kind of what I mentioned earlier of this like you automatically feel close to these tapes and you don't know these people. Like we're dropped in a second, boom, we're emotionally thwarted left.
Yeah.
So it's a really nice device, but it really does speak to me, at least as a storyteller, where I can access emotions left, right, and center quite quickly, which grief can often bring you to, all in one setting. So yeah, sound was a big heavy hitter and we worked on it for months. And, our editor as well, Micah, who's so fantastic. He's at Uppercut. And I mean, like, just what an incredible editor he is. And he really got also, I think, that I didn't want this to feel like a cool kid film.
Sure.
I was like, a lot of my mentors early on in the project were like, Elena, you're shooting on film. It's Boyhood. It's Queens. If this feels like another Calvin Klein ad, I swear to God. I'm like, don't worry. And I always said I wanted it to feel quite like ajar, a little off,
Yeah.
like Gumbo and early Harmony Korine is like a big reference point here. But I think the greatest feedback we got was like it's unreferenceable. We couldn't figure out what it felt like. It sits in its own category, which is so sweet. But I think overall, it's like you take a big risk. And a lot of people were like, Elena, is this film so you and da da da? And I was like, not really, honestly. And I think that there's that great line by Rick Rubin that's like, if you have an idea and you don't do it, and then you see all of a sudden a director do an idea and carry out this idea, and you're like, oh my God, I thought of that. And now they're doing it. I must not be original. That's not really how it plays. It's more so that an idea is like coming to you like lightning, and it's going to come through you.
Mm.
Not every idea is completely and utterly you to a core. It's an idea that's coming and needs to be expressed and put out into the world through you. And this was one of those ideas that I was working on for a while, but I'm Not Home in this form with the voicemails and in Queens in one afternoon. This was something that hit me like a lightning bolt. And it's, I do a lot of sports work where I have a lot of control over the emotion of the audience,
Yeah.
where I'm like, at the end, we're going to get everyone excited about the WNBA or about the Olympics or about the NBA. And I think that for this film, it had to access such a vulnerable point and place as a storyteller to create such an unpunctuated, ending and story. And it was an idea that just needed, it was like it hit me and it needed to be out in the world. And it takes elements of you and it is, part of you, but it also was like one of those things that kind of just hits you and just you kind of just need to do and you don't know why. And once it kind of started happening, it was like everything fell into place. And of course, people don't know this, but I think it's important to air this out in conversations like this. But this is like 4 years in the making. It's not something that
Wow.
just, it just happens. Like everyone works so hard, and I have such an affinity for, I think, the alacrity that goes into so many team members and my producers like Aaron and John Henry and Scott and Ellis, these kind of producers that just go, yep, I'm down. And, that is what pushes the dial at the end of the day. But it's like, us directors and us writers, we're working on these things for years. But yeah, it was definitely something that just like it needed to be put out in the world. But it's wild when it's like, was this me? But then it becomes part of you and your body of work as a storyteller, whether it's like the vulnerable, more poignant side or, the more, excited, amped side. But I think there's something really interesting to like more of the elegiac work like this.
Yeah, it's like you said, it kind of becomes you over time, even if it's not something that, came exactly that way from the get-go, but, through collaboration with not only the actors, the producers, the editors, it kind of becomes a part of you over time. And I will say that I'm so glad that you got to put this story out there. You tell so much in so many different types of ways in 12 minutes that sometimes you don't even get in a full theatrical release for even like big blockbuster films or, these independent films that are feature length, 2 hour plus telling these stories. You achieved all of this within 12 minutes. And that is an amazing feat right there. Again, the reception for this is incredible. You had Tribeca. You're right now you're at a short film festival in Los Angeles, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Holy Shorts.
Yeah, perfect. So, yeah, it's great to, see this slowly doing its thing out there, taking off and being that way. Now, I wanted to ask the question about I'm Not Home. What does the title of that mean to you? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm interested to hear your thought behind it.
Well, I have a question for you.
Ooh, okay.
What does it mean to you?
Hmm, love that. I'm Not Home is to me that feeling of it, it's coming from an idea of the voice messages. So, we have the answering machines and because we're not home, the messages are being left. We're not there to pick up the phone. So we can look at it that way. And then also I'm not home is this feeling maybe of more of a psychological thing of not being fully at home and understanding of who we are fully or that inability to express exactly how we feel and that comfortability and not feeling grounded. And I think, focusing on the two of these main characters, I think they don't feel at home with their emotions and their feelings. And there's a tenderness and a comfort and a safety about being home. And in a way, by he, I mean Tylo, feels that way with Rune, but is not able to express that. So with that, sorry, I feel like this is all really I'm dragging it
Made my
out.
day. This
Um,
made my day, this
but
answer.
yeah, but that's definitely what I get from there. And I think Tyler's willing to accept that comfortability and he wants Rune to be his home. And it doesn't have to be, it doesn't even have to be a sexual thing. It doesn't have to be a full on romance, but it's that accepting and that tenderness that is what's important. And I actually have a tattoo that says "You are home," which It's crazy. It's right here on my wrist.
No
Um,
way.
and
We're
it's
gonna take
actually,
medits on that.
yeah, right. And that comes from one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Almost Famous, the scene on the bus. Um, that line, I'm sorry, I know this doesn't really have to do with your film. I
Where she
apologize,
screams
but
at him, "You are
you
home."
are home. Yeah, and that is exactly what this is, and it's half my writing and half of Cameron Crowe's writing. You are home when you're with the people that mean something to you. You don't have to be within the four walls of your actual house. And I thought that moment, especially that it wasn't scripted, felt more realistic. And that is such a pivotal moment to me. So, turning it back to your film, I'm Not Home. It's kind of like the reverse of that. He wants to be home, and that home is with someone that he loves and trusts. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
there that's it. I mean, it's like, I could cry right now. Yeah, I think, you nailed it, so I don't need to add anything to it. That's exactly
Perfect.
what I think, like, when my friend passed, I felt not like home anymore here,
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I think this film is, I think the ambiguity of the whole thing, the not having the bookend, not having all the answers, the 12-minute runtime, that is what makes this movie this movie. You can down the road say, I'm going to turn this into a 2-hour long theatrical release and we're going to extend it over summers and turn it into a, before sunrise type movie. But it doesn't need that. If that's what happens, great. But it doesn't need that. I think this story in all of its incompleteness is complete. And I think that is what matters. And that's what makes it stand out. And you were talking about kind of going in your own lane, and that if that was your intention, you achieved it, because I picked up on that, and I am just, a casual movie viewer. I don't make film. I don't know the process. I like,
That's what we love. We love the
yeah,
casual movie, like, goer.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
our
And I,
people.
yeah, right. Hell yeah. And I love connecting with creatives such as yourself. And I think there's so much love that goes into filmmaking, and just art in general. But, the art that I love and lean towards is filmmaking. And this is an achievement on so many levels. And yeah, I feel like I'm saying the same things over and over again, but I mean it. And through your creativity and what you set out to do, you've achieved it amazingly. I started feeling like the entire movie was about people being physically present, but also emotionally absent at the same exact time. And that's obviously something that you were trying to create here. You're physically here, but you're not emotionally available. Do you think that if they would have just leaned into that emotional side, even just from your own experiences in life, do you think that the outcome would have been a little bit more resolved and we would have had a different type of ending?
I think that there's a theme that I really did wanna be conscious of in the writing of this, which is about timing
Mm,
and control.
sure.
And I think that there's something in, you just missed their call. It's like, time, there's so many missed connections in this
Yeah.
film in the short runtime. And then it's funny because finally the moment where the message, he's so emotionally available and he's ready to bear it all. Where he's like, "Hey, I know that." I think it's just like, "Hey, it's Jake." And it's
Mm,
the moment where he's about to say everything. And
yeah.
that's when Room shuts it off because he's bored.
Yeah.
And then Eli, Tylo goes, "What the fuck, man?" Like,
About to say something real. And you turn it off.
finally,
Oh, yeah.
finally. And
Yeah.
so the film's actually about wanting to be emotionally available. Like,
Yeah.
that's, I think, definitely a takeaway that some people might have. That was an intention for sure that I wanted to weave into the writing and the acts of
Yeah.
this short, where he's pissed because that's all he wants is to confront it, but he doesn't know how, and they're dancing around. And I think that as a female director, there is something still in the female experience that I understand in the male experience. And we've read a lot of books, done a lot of research, and, I think that also there's an avoidance in that dance that I wanted to capture that's inherently boyish.
Hmm.
So I don't know if it's about being emotionally unavailable. I think it's about trying to get there and it being too late. And I think that that's what happened between me and my friend. And I think that that's a takeaway that could possibly,
Yeah.
be felt by a viewer that is definitely explored somewhat in these characters. And I think that, yeah, and I think that, like, you know, there's there's moments in the film that also create such like levity that is like colorful to that. Like the boy, we call them the park boys,
Park
like the
Boys.
boys that open up the film that we have the flashback to in the middle of the film and at the end. And they're just fun, you
Yeah.
know, they're like our levity, they're our beauty. And you know, we called this the sonic motif of every time you hear the choir
Mhm.
that we had for the score, which was so beautiful.
Love it.
Like every time the choir voices go is we called it voices from the other side. And every time that choir goes is like a hidden little Easter egg of it signifying that like he's passed, like he's
Mhm.
not here anymore. So like in any of those scenes, it means like he's gone. He's never going to see him. And I think that there's a lot of these levels of like the levity or, you know, finally the emotional availability. And also, um, I think to answer your question is like really one shot, which was the motorcycle shot, you know, the scooter shot where he puts his head on his shoulder. And you're
Yeah.
talking being available emotionally. And I think that as someone who, you know, got her motorcycle license and rides scooters, and I've
Mm.
obsessed with this feeling of vastness of life. Like
Yeah.
I want to feel it all. And I think that there's no greater moment of vulnerability and surrender against the backdrop of the vastness of life than when you put your head on someone's shoulder while riding a scooter. You can feel life all around you, and yet you're doing the ultimate act of trust. And I think in that way, you know, we got a piece of that, you know,
Yeah.
but it's subtle, you know, and it was nice because at the after party, someone, I think he was a producer on another one of the shorts, came up to me and he was like, if you know anything about love, like that scene says it all. And I was like,
Mm, yeah.
thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a beautiful moment.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So with that, another question I have for you is, why is it sometimes that it's easier for people to listen to strangers talk about intimacy than to be vulnerable with someone that we love and trust?
Mm, I mean, that's a psychological question, you know. We want to go into some psychoanalysis
Yeah,
here.
let's go.
We
Let's
got a
go.
theory. I mean, listen, I think it's so much easier. It's like when we give great advice to our friends, but we can't give good advice to ourselves. You know, I think it's
Yep.
easier to see something subjectively than, you know, so personally. Um, I also think that, you know, there's a lot we just discussed about vulnerability and what that means. And, you know, what I was discussing about this late coming of age and that vulnerable state as well. And I think that when you listen to someone else's problems or tapes or voices or messages or, you know, secrets, it's so fun and exciting because it's finally not your life, you know?
Yeah.
And you like jump in the pool.
Yeah.
And so I found that when I played with this idea of finding these tapes at vintage stores and them having this ritual together of smoking weed and going through these tapes and chatting and being off their phones, it it definitely opens up that Pandora's box of so many different stories where I think that then you have access to that. You have access to like give advice or to feel something or to, you know, be bored of something. Like there's, you know, it's definitely an emotional device for a reason. And it's definitely a subconscious narration for a reason. But yeah, I think it's just easier in general. I don't know. That's my take is like, it's easier for me when my friends tell me their problems. I'm like, lay it on me.
Yeah.
And then,
Yep.
you know, talking about our own or having to be, you know, inwardly reflective and judgmental or whatever, I think it's harder. So I don't know if I answered that question great, but
No, you did. I had that conversation a lot with friends and family members, even my own partner. It's just kind of like we can have these conversations. We're not afraid to have them with friends about, you know, about relationship things, that things we want or we don't want. And sometimes in that relationship, you're not communicating that the way that you should, that you find much easier to be with someone else. But I thought this film kind of captures that as well, obviously with the messages and the things that are left unsaid with them, which is the overall theme of everything. But if you could leave an answering machine message for your younger self, what would it say?
that's funny because I did this exercise years ago, which is like you write your eulogy and how you want people to like remember you by. And it really makes you reflect on like what kind of person you want to show up in the world as. But to my younger self, I mean, I'd probably tell her to like ease up, you know? Something about this film is that, grief doesn't resolve, it changes shape, which is something I said about the making of this film. And I did feel something change in my own self after making this, which I didn't expect. And I think that also to say to anyone younger is like art really does transform. And if you feel dumb for making something or it feels like a selfish story because it's not about anything, like you don't know that. And we have art for a reason and it's really important. And so like even holding on to that and not just doing things for commercial capitalistic gain, it's really important, And I think that that's what creates community and conversation and intimacy. So.
Incredible work. I absolutely love this short film, and I'm so excited to see what's next for it and continue to see your successes, whatever that might be. But right now we're living in the I'm Not Home era of your career, and what an incredible moment it is. You should be so proud. And yeah, I'm excited to see what else is going to go on with this film, more festivals. Are there any more plans for things like that, or is it little?
We're going to see.
We're going to see.
We're getting some interesting emails. I think that also baby's got to go through the world now,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, seriously, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me about your film. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think that your film's incredible, and you have such a beautiful mind and a beautiful way to put things out there. So we all appreciate your art and the patience and time that you put into creating that for all of us to see.
Thank you, Dave. It takes a village, but thank you. And also, by the way, thank you so much for having me and for really loving the film. Like this is why we do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No problem at all. It all started from me seeing you posted a picture online. I think it was the poster for the film, the cover art. And I was like, oh, even the picture alone, I was like, what is this about? What's happening? Yeah. And it kind of took me back in time, just laying on a bed and with your friend, hanging out, listening to whatever it might be, like a Discman or anything like that. So even just the picture alone took me back in time and made me want to check it out. And here we are talking about it. So
Star, the great photographer. Anyway, Dave, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for everything. I hope people really have fun listening to this, or don't, or they just get to hang out with us.
Either way, I enjoyed hanging out with you, and I hope they enjoyed as well. And hopefully everyone gets to see this film in whatever capacity sometime soon.
Let's go.
Let's go. Hey, you have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Okay.
You too. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks. Bye.